work here at the History Center, and I'm not going to say too much about this, except I'm going to introduce Bill Quinby, who is our host. And it is Bill's work that has gathered this unbelievable group of sports heroes, local sports heroes, for you to visit today. So, Bill, I'm going to turn this program over to you, and thank you very, very much.
You're welcome. I don't know if we're heroes at all. We're kind of old. And the thing that we've done here today, we've tried to bring together a group of people who have lived here or participated in Cedar Rapids, Linn County. And we're basically not going to talk so much about sports heroes. There may be a few brought up, but we're going to kind of talk about where things used to be, like ball diamonds. George Henry's going to tell you the swimming pool he was a swimmer in, this type of thing. And we're going to try to limit it to about 3 to 5 minutes at the most, and I may cut some people off. We do have a few that couldn't make it, and I'd like to acknowledge them. Bob Jennings was going to be here, and he became a little ill last week and had a pacemaker put in his heart or his chest, and he talked to me again this morning and wishes everybody well. And by the way, Tommy, here's what he said about you. Theron Thompson there. Raise your hand, Tommy. He said, and these are old IC people. Yeah, if you don't know where IC was, it was the Catholic school on 4th Avenue, just before 10th Street. Tommy, Bob Jennings said you were probably the purest basketball player that he ever did watch play. And Tommy played back in the 30s, or he'll let us know exactly when it was, but it was late 30s. And Red wants you to know that. And he said that probably you started the tradition at IC, or Immaculate Conception, of the fine basketball they played until they closed down. So Red wanted you to know that. And we have a couple others, Fermi Harris, Bud's buddy, who they were youngsters, couldn't make it today. He came up a little ill this morning and notified Bud that he wouldn't be able to make it. Don Buckheister wasn't able to make it today. He was going to talk on Daniels, and I can fill in there. Bucky has a son-in-law that's very, very ill, and that was called to Pennsylvania on Saturday. There's a couple others that I'll bring up. So today we're just going to be very informal. If you have a question, you're welcome to raise your hand, and we'll cut you off if you get too long. And a couple. Barney, you're not quite well, you are, I think, maybe the oldest person here. And we're expecting but I like Barney Morrison. We may have 2 more people, Baron Brenner and Coach Paul Scott, coming in from Mount Vernon. If they do get here, Paul is 97, and he was the coach of the wrestling team at Cornell in 1947 that won the national NCAA championship, a little school. So he may come in a little bit. But Barney, let's just get us started. And Barney was around our city. He went to Washington High School back in the 30s, late 20s. But I asked him to just tell us a little bit about the Cedar Rapids Kid League that started way back in 1940. Barney, you got to use it, Barney. We're hard to hear.
Back in the early 40s, John Beck had a sporting goods store downtown, and he actually started Kids League Baseball. And we started with 16 teams. 8 of them were sponsored by service clubs, and 8 of them were sponsored by businesses. The age ran from 9 to 15, and it was a few years before they broke it down because the poor 9-year-old kids didn't have a chance to start out with it. It was all one class, 9 to 15. But they finally broke it down and turned out fine. I know myself, the teams that we sponsored were in the Daniels Park area, and from the minute the snow went off until the minute the snow came back, those kids were out there playing baseball.
you're reading a lot of people think that there's been baseball for youth. Oh, here comes the coach. Please come on in, Baron. And Coach Scott, you're our honored guest today. Baron, there's a place right up here for you. Doesn't he look like a wrestler, the little guy? We'll let him get seated here. All right. Mr. Scott, thank you for coming down. Bill Quimby, nice to see you. Barney's going just real back to Kid League. Now we have Babe Ruth leagues, we have all kinds of softball leagues for youth, and it's a lot more complicated the way it's coaches coach long time. Back in the Kid League days, like Barney was a sponsor for every year there was a Kid League, and that probably was something like 40 some years. But the kids played, and like you said, they were 9 to 15. It was a little uneven when a 15-year-old pitched against a 9-year-old, and they played on the big diamond like at Daniels and Riverside. I'd like to skip over now to Olsey Trimble. Olsey, and we have Greta Van Fleet here. We'll get to Greta next, but Olsey Trimble was probably one of the most outstanding, speed skater and track runner in the history of Cedar Rapids. He probably wasn't the best skater, but he was right up there, 1, 2, or 3. Mostly tell us where he used to skate and how skating used to be something different than it is in Cedar Rapids today.
Well,
Speak right into the mic.
we did our skating at Roosevelt Rink, which was over there by the ballpark, the old Raiders ballpark. It was a 2-block area, 2 city blocks. It was where all the boys went every night and all the girls went every night. It was a good place to meet. We were there because the ice was good or bad, and they did everything. It was a place to meet. We used to train together there. We would oftentimes the crowds would be so heavy with skaters out having a good time that we'd have to wait till after the lights went off to work out because it was just too crowded.
Well, Olsey, tell us who's the best skater in Cedar Rapids history?
Well, that would probably be George Shemmick. George, of course, was world class in the 10,000 meters. George Shemmick had a kind of a unique thing happen. The National Olympic Committee chooses training teams, who's going to go. And George got overlooked. And so Mr. Dennis, Lou Dennis, Mr. Dennis and George shoveled off a 400-meter track on the river. And they stayed home and worked. And by golly, he made one of the first person in the team as a 10,000-meter skater, setting a new United States record at that time, as I believe. George was a person we all admired a lot. He was built like Superman and performed like Superman, both, those of you that knew him. He used to always have plenty of time, he and his brother Ed, Larry Dennis and Bob Dennis, always had time for the younger skaters to help them, let them tag along. In fact, we probably were such pests that they started picking us up, and they knew we were going to be there anyway, so they would pick us up on the way over and drop us off and go tag along.
We'll see. One last question, then we'll go to Greta. Greta more or less skated on the east side. We didn't have the rink that we have now, and it really hasn't been that active in Manhattan, out by Alice Park. That rink really came after Arthur's School and Roosevelt School. The Roosevelt rink was huge. It's where the county buildings are now. Fillmore School was built on it. And Ray Pretz is up, will explain Lady Pretz baseball there. Also, one last thing, who probably, and this isn't putting Greta down a little bit, was probably the outstanding female skater in our history.
That would have to be Ann Cooper.
Ann Cooper Culver.
Ann Cooper Culver was, well, her dad was my coach in track. And he came up to me one day and Ann's about 6 years think I have the track girl. And Ann had been in her first track meet, and she performed beautifully. Of course, Ann would perform beautifully about anything she wanted to do. She was national speed skating champion in the intermediate division. She was North American intermediate champion in speed skating. At the same time, she was a national women's diving champion. And Ann had a lot more going for her than that. She was a wonderful young lady, very unassuming about herself, kind of person you're just pretty proud of to have as part of the group. She can also win a music contest too.
And last thing about Olsey, he was also a track champion. He was a runner, the whole Trimble family. His son was a national skating champion, wasn't he?
Yes,
Matt, is it?
Matt won the men's championship.
And when Olsey ran for Roosevelt High School, then I believe he went to Illinois. You were a Big Ten champion runner.
No.
No, you weren't a Big Ten champion?
I finished the top 3 a few times, but I was the champion.
But he does have one honor. He went back to Drake a few years ago in the Master Mile, or 800, and he won that. How old were you when you won it?
Well, first time I won it, I was 46. The second time I was 49.
49, so it's a couple years ago. Greta over here, she was a skater, a champion in her own right, and she lived right across from Arthur Rink, and where lots of people don't even know there was a skating rink there. Tell us a little bit about it, Greta.
Well, my parents bought their home there, I think it was the first home in 1935. They had 3 kids, so I'm sure they were looking for a place close to school, so that did it with a rink right across the street, and there's a schoolhouse about 2 doors away, so it made it real convenient, but they always say that your life is kind of formed by what's around you, and I was lucky enough to be the only girl out of 12, so my dad said when we were about 4, he said, how about we'll get on that ice across the street and start skating. He comes home with a pair of figure skates, which was competing with 11 boys and racing around. That was a real disaster for me because of the toes. And I said, Dad, you just go right back down to Armstrong's and give me the right down here. So I had to fight with the boys the whole time. And I was just turning 9, and I don't know if most remembers the English, which I have. They lived down the street, and they were a big skating family. Dad was their coach. My dad was a coach from the front row window, which was convenient for him. But anyway, we come home at night from skating and say, you did this wrong, you did that wrong, get out there. So the English would come up, and their dad was a coach, he had the gun and the whole bit, and he started down the right side of the rink, down the other side, and he was going, I would assist everybody. He said, Sis, you get on the left side of that thing, and you go down the other side, and I'll tell you when you come home who wins this thing. So it was on a Saturday night. So the gun went off, and I went down the other side, and I didn't have as long as anybody else. So I got home, and Dad said, you know, you beat those kids all to pieces. They got a good coach, and they do all this gun starting and stuff. So he gets a Gazette and signs my name up and throws me in the silver skate races the next day out. It was a Lou Dennis at that time, changed to Manhattan. But anyway, the races went on, and I won it, and that was in 1942. And I also have Osie's picture here. He won that day too, and so anyway, we went on through life, you know, go to college and that, but we still, you know, skated a lot. When I came home, I got a job at the hospital, and one day this gal came up to me and she says, didn't you used to skate? And I said, yeah. And she said, well, they're going to have silver skate races, and she said, I'd like to get a bunch together so we can skate. And I said, yeah, but you know, that senior women thing is 18 and up, and they're practicing for the Olympics in West Dallas. And I said, I'm not going to go out there and compete against these 18-year-olds. So they put another division in for the old people. I guess that's what you consider. But anyway, senior women, that covers a lot of ground. So we went up to the rink and skated, and there was 2 or 3 of us from St. Luke's and several from Mercy. And that morning that we were going was about 30 below zero. It was just absolutely awful. But anyway, we got up there and did our thing, and I think it was probably the most embarrassing moment of my life because I found out that whoever I was skating against really didn't know how to skate. So, you know, you go around twice and they're still trying to get around once. But anyway, my kids had a bet on it, you know, because they kept bringing kids home and say, you know, nobody can beat my mom. Well, I never got beat by those kids. But then, you know, we get up to this. So anyway, they were the ones that put me up to this and got me going in it, so I took the day off and did this thing. So the next morning, a Super Bowl Sunday, and it said, a Super Bowl thing across, and down the side it says, waits 30 years for another state title, which was all about me and OC. So I cut out about 6 of those and gave them to my kids, and I said, you take these to school, and this is it. So one of them was 42, and the other one was in 1972, so.
Okay,
But anyway, they had I don't know if you remember Devin Nichols, who was,
yes?
and his son-in-law, or not Ray, but Ray Frame and Ray Frame's son-in-law were the ones that flooded the skating rinks during the night. And when they'd come over on Saturday morning, they'd always pick us up in their international truck and they'd drive around with them. And the craziest thing happened because it was Jeff Cook, and when he'd get done, we'd go in the warming house and do our thing. And after I went through school and I met my to-be husband, I didn't know at the time what he would be, but he was. And anyway, he invited me to go over to his cousin's for Thanksgiving dinner. And I said, well, I don't know where it is. But anyway, he said, I'll pick you up because my folks are coming up. I might need you. So we went over. I got out of the car and the rest of them were unloading the groceries. And I went up and knocked on this guy's door. And he came to the door and he says, what are you doing here? So I guess I'm supposed to eat dinner with you. And here was J.F. Cook that I'd been riding in that truck with since I was 4 years old and didn't realize he was John's cousin. Because he called him J.F. and he was Jeff Cook.
Okay.
Anyway, we had a lot of fun on the Arthur ring.
The rinks, which Arthur, I believe, is flooded a little bit now, but not really to my knowledge. And the only rink that we have in the winter, other than Beaver, is a little bit, and maybe a couple other spots in the community, would be Manhattan, and if the weather isn't good. But it seems like in the old days there was a longer, colder winter, and they got in a lot of meets, and OC and Greta. Let's skip over a little bit to another sport here a little bit. George Henry, probably more famous for taking pictures all over the country, and especially Cedar Rapids. But George was an outstanding, and still is. He's going to swim in the National Masters Swim Meet coming up in another month or two. But tell them about the swim pool that you used to be in, George. Hand it over here, Barb.
I think people can hear me. Can everybody hear me all right? Yeah, they can hear me.
Yeah.
They can hear me better without that. Anyway, when I was growing up, swimming was not a big thing. The high schools didn't have swimming. The colleges didn't have swimming, and so forth. But I grew up kind of in Lake Okoboji up in northwestern Iowa. And you were up there, you didn't think much about swimming. You went in the water to cool off and paddle around a little and just lie in the sun. But all of a sudden there was a serious boat accident up there and 12 people drowned. 2 boats were racing, they collided with each other, and the people in there, I think there were 12 that drowned, and the others were able to swim to shore and save themselves. And about that time I thought, you know, maybe I'll learn how to swim. And I was about 12 years old then, and so that summer, I learned how to swim. And I came back, and there was swimming at the Y. And that was basically the only place that they had swimming, was at the Y, as in there was a 20-yard pool. That's where the distance of all the pools were at that time. And so consequently, I went down and I joined the swim team. Now that's strange for a guy that just swam, but the earliest age group was 12 and under. That was junior A. And then from 13 and 14 was junior B, and 15 to 17 was intermediate, and then above that was seniors. But anyway, I was 12 years old, so I was in the junior A group, and I swam with George Ross. And we had to swim the tremendous length of 20 yards. We swam 20-yard freestyle, and we swam 20-yard backstroke, and we also swam 40-yard freestyle. It was thought at that time that if somebody 12 or under swam further than 40 yards, they would hurt themselves. And so the long event was 40 yards in junior A. So anyway, George Ross and I got first and second each year. I got second. But anyway, we swam all through the year. I'm I'm still swimming. I'm not sure whether George is or not, but we had a great time. The pools around Cedar Rapids, the pool out at Thomas Park, but to the best of my knowledge, they had no swimming teams. Then they opened up Ellis, and they had lap swimming there, or they had lanes anyway marked on the pool. And then they had, after World War II, they came up with the river swim. Now the river swim was also by age group, and I'm not sure what the ages were in that, but by the time I swam in it, I was in the senior group or so forth, which maybe was 16 and over, I'm not sure. But anyway, the younger group, they would take them up a half mile to swim down the river, and the next group up, they would take them maybe, I think, a mile up, and then the seniors would take them 3 miles up the river and say, okay, you'll swim down to the pavilion down here, and that's where the finish is. Every boat had every swimmer had a person in a canoe along with them so that they wouldn't drown in the process of swimming down the river. Probably a good thing. But anyway, they just took us out into the river and said, okay, go. And I know that was the first time I'd ever swum in a river. And I would find sandbars and rocks and everything else with my stroke as I went down. So it was quite an experience. And the last meet I swam down there, I swam with Ed Clota. Maybe some of you remember him. But he and I swam down the river, and I thought I had won, but he beat me. And that was the last year of the river swim, because then they thought the river was getting a little bit polluted or some such thing. So the next year, the river swim was over at the Ellis Pool, and we swam a mile. Swam, obviously with laps. I think it was a 50-yard pool, so it was a lot of 50 yards. And I swam with John Stark in that last river swim that was in the Ellis Pool. I believe this was the end of the river swim, but at that time. But when I first started swimming, they had 3 strokes. They had the breaststroke and the backstroke and the freestyle. And sometimes if you had a very, very strong swimmer, and when they were swimming the 100 yards in the senior groups, the last leg, maybe they were able to go overhand with the stroke, because it was faster, but it was extremely tiring and extremely wearing. A few years after that, they put together, instead of having the breaststroke and being able to use the overhead, they took the overhand and changed the kick and made it into the fly stroke. So they went from 3 strokes when I started swimming to 4 strokes that they have today. But swimming today is very, very competitive. You swim a lot of laps, you get very good shape. The people swimming today are big. The 9-year-olds will beat could beat the people that swam back in the Y in those days. They swim fast today. We swam. But anyway, it was fun back then.
Thank you, George. Now, George is quite an athlete. Over the years, he was a captain of a raft in the Green River. Is that correct in Colorado?
I was a boatman on the Green River.
Boatman over the years, and he's still swimming, and I know he took part in the dragon boat races up till about 5 years ago. I think George is about 80 years old. So, going to the next person, Tommy Thompson. What can you tell us about Legion Baseball, IC School? Reg Jennings was going to go into IC, but Tommy was quite an athlete, basketball-wise and baseball-wise. We didn't have high school baseball back in the 30s or 40s until Ray Pretton. Tommy?
Okay, thank you, Bill. On the IC first of the 2 things, starting about 1937, IC became very prominent statewide in basketball and maintained that through the years with a lot of good teams and until the school was torn down in, I think it was early 1960s. Anyway, they experienced a lot of success. But I think the history of what this is to really talk about is back in those days, it's kind of hard to believe now that he had a jump ball after every basket. And he went back to center circle get the center jump all the time. Nothing, the ball we played with in those days, the molded ball, which you know today, came in during my high school years. And at that time, it was a lace ball. The laces were just like a football. Did you see the laces? Basketball had those too at that time, and then molded ball came in later. Gymnasiums and facilities, of course, improved so much, as you all know, and thank goodness. But I'll give you an example of the worst gym that I ever played in, and if you can visualize this, a very small to begin with. The ceiling was very low, but it had two big posts behind about the free throw circle on each end. Big enough posts that you couldn't put your arms around it. And the backboard rather, was right up against the wall. You know, today you got 4 feet or more, hopefully, where you have a chance to drive and control yourself, but you just hit the wall. And then they had steam pipes for heat that went around. If you got up too high, it'd burn your hand or whatever you hit it with. And you came into the gymnasium right in the middle of the floor, right at mid-court. And if you can believe this or not, at the bottom 2 steps coming onto the court were in bounds. So that's the worst gym I ever played. I played in another one awfully bad, but not that bad. Switching to the Legion, at that time, as Bill said, there were no high school baseball. But American Legion was big. In fact, the Legion through the years have had many state champions and still are having them. And at that time, they were all Legion teams, and they were good. But each school had their own team. There were 6. Like Franklin was Hubbard Ice, McKinley was City Service, Roosevelt was Duping Gas and Butternut, and the Scrooge of the town baseball was Wilson that had Roosevelt Hotel. And they won several championships, including one that I feel very fortunate to be able to play on. And they have continued, of course, to play that way. And they had district champions, regional champions. And in 2006, the National American Legion tournament, the National now, is going to be held here at our new ballpark. So keep that in mind and promote that and do a little bit of good on that. Daniels Park was reversed from, not reversed totally, but home plate used to be at the end of left field, right down the foul line, and you hit the other way, and late in the summer when the sun was right in the right-hand hitter's eyes when they were trying to see the ball. So I think it was 1939 that they moved up where home plate is today. And where there weren't too many fields, but the one we played in, St. Patrick's was Smolikoff's, and Armstrong's was a combination of IC and St. Wenceslas. And we practiced down across from St. Wenceslas School in the Wilsons that had a diamond there, and I think it's a parking lot now. But it was a real good field. We were lucky to have anything, but I'd like to tell you that a third of the field was sand, a third of it was gravel, and the other third was thistles. We were glad to have a place to go, and that's where we practiced. So thank you much for your time. Glad to have you all here.
As Tommy says, the American Legion program, and Ray will allude to that in a moment when they went to the high school, was a very solid baseball program in the state of Iowa before World War II, and then especially after World War II. It has kind of faded away now. There are not as many American Legion posts throughout our state or throughout the country, so they were the sponsors. But Tommy was a very fine athlete. He played at the University of Iowa, also officiated Big Ten football, and was vice president of Life Investors. Barron, you brought a special guest. Now, I'm really proud of Barron, and our friendship has been a long time since we were in Iowa. I'm a little older. But today, Barron's going to kind of report on a team that probably some of you don't know about. In 1947, Cornell College, which is probably not much different than it was then as far as size, competed in wrestling against the bigger guys, Iowa University stuff. And tell them what happened, Barron. And we do have, it's an honor to have Paul Scott, the coach of that team, who is 97 years of age. And did I make you older than you are? Yeah, and he plays golf every day. Baron, take it over. We got about 5 minutes.
Well, I won't take the 5 minute thing, but what a marvelous idea, and I was just sitting here in trance by everybody's stories, and I even forgot I was going to talk. But I want to set one thing straight, since this is history group here, is that I saw in the paper I was a national collegiate wrestling champion. Never happened.
Yeah, but you were pretty good.
But it never happened. I was on the wrestling team and football team in Iowa, and I had winning record in my life, but nothing like that. And I think my biggest contribution to Iowa wrestling was the discovery that cornstarch works best for wrestlers with jock itch. And my biggest contribution to football was that I was the originator and captain of the old Mau Mau team, if any of you were fans back in the 50s when on the Road Bowl teams. So, yeah, those are my contributions. Very minor compared to what the rest of the folks are talking about here. I have the very easiest assignment of anyone here today, though, and that is to talk about Paul Scott and his marvelous success there at Cornell in the 40s. I was long been a state recognized for his wrestling at the high school and the collegiate level, and when we speak of collegiate wrestling today, we think of the University of Iowa, Dan Gable, Iowa State, but in 1947 and in the 40s, if anyone ever thought about wrestling, it was about the best in wrestling, it was about one school and one coach. That was Paul Scott of Cornell College. It had 650 students, and its diminutive wrestling coach, Paul Scott, sitting here beside me, had been a competitive, and Scotty had been a competitive, scrappy Cornell quarterback. You can see at 125 pounds, and wrestled 128 pounds in the 1920s. In the post-war 40s, Paul Scott had 2 coaching equals in the land. Paul Scott's Cornell wrestling team, then called the Purple, accomplished what no group of men had ever done before and have never done since. They won the 1947 NCAA team championship, as well as winning the 1947, that was the NCAA championship, as well as winning the 1947 National AAU championship. And I have here a picture that you might want to look at later. So that group of men right there did more than any other group has ever done in achievement, because they're bringing those 2 championships.
We'll just move it around.
And Mrs. Scott says she wants me to bring that home, and neither Scotty nor I are forget it. Cornell's team was acclaimed the best in the nation, and was featured as the centerfold story in Look magazine. And let me tell you some scores for dual meets during the season. Scotty went wherever the competition was toughest. The University of Illinois was the Big 9 champions. Now later the Big 10, but they were the Big 9 then. Scotty beat them 19-11. The Big 6 champions, now later the Big 8, and now the Big 12. The Big 12 not adding any more wrestling teams of any caliber though than one of those Big 6. He beat them 26-8. And all year long, everybody had been reading about the scourge of the East, Lehigh University. And Scotty took his team out there and beat them 36-0, an embarrassing loss to them. In fact, Scotty still has some old 78 records of a radio station that broadcast the meet. And in the beginning, the record started with the announcer being very enthusiastic. He hoped these Iowa boys could come out and give a match to these great Lehigh wrestlers. And after they had won about the first 4 matches, well, he was starting to cool down a little bit. And finally, at the heavyweight, he was begging for a win, but shut them all out. And I was going to read off some of those names off that picture, but I'll see it later. I'll do that later. Oh, all right. Because here's the way that lineup went, and this is why they were 36-0. Greg Meredith was the student manager. He was the student manager. Remember this is post-war years, because he had a 1947 Chevrolet and could buy the team in. Greg was a 115-pounder. Lowell Lang was a 136-pounder, national champion. R. Ellison was 36. Leo Thompson was a 128-pounder. Hauser was 121. Kent Lang, 155, Al Parton, 177, Dale Thomas, 175 in heavyweight, Roger Schnook, 145, and Dexter, 165. I'm Coach Paul Scott. And when I was coaching at Cornell, I would look at that picture and think, how in the world did anybody ever do that? And he is, so Scott is a really unusual man. And his meteoric 7-year coaching tenure at Cornell, Scott coached men who were on 3 Olympic teams, who won 5 NCAA individual titles and 12 other NCAA medals, and who won 13 national AAU individual titles and 21 other national AAU medals. Keep in mind that medals were only given for 4 places then, and that the AAU was much, much bigger than the NCAA. It was a bigger achievement to do that because you not only had the collegiate wrestlers there, but you had all the persons who had been great collegiate wrestlers who were still wrestling for clubs. Scotty's records were unparalleled at that time, unbeaten since, and likely will never be broken. Because, especially considering the size of the school, 650 students, because now they've broken the NCAA down in divisions 1, 2, and 3, and Cornell and Co. and any other school would not be in that division anymore. In addition to his wrestling achievements, Scotty was also athletic director at Davis College following his 7-year tenure ago, and he was a pioneer professional in alumni relations at Cornell. And he and Harris Lamb were buddies at Cornell and set the tone for what an alumni group should be. And I'm really proud to present to you Paul K. Scott, my friend of 44 years and a coach unsurpassed, in my mind, anywhere in any sport, age 97 and counting.
It's a great pleasure to be here and to be present with all you people, and I'll be very interested in hearing the rest of the program.
Thank you, Scotty. Thank you for coming.
Thank you very much for bringing Coach Paul Scott. Barron, in his own right, has been probably one of the most prominent people in this area in the field of athletics, wrestling, recreation, and retired from Coe College a couple of years ago as their athletic director. Outstanding wrestling coach and really a very outstanding person. So Barron, thank you, and Coach Scott. If you need to leave early, you're certainly welcome. We're going to go about another half
You trying to get rid of this? We won't stay and hear this stuff. Everybody speak up though, because we both got hearing aids.
Okay. Ron Gonder came down today to just tell us a quick story. Probably a lot of us didn't know this, but we remember this. Nowadays, almost every high school weekend, there's broadcast about every game. Well, back in the 20s and the 30s and 40s, that wasn't so. But WMT, which Ron retired from, Mr. Corton, who was the owner way back and then, young man, Bill Corton, I believe, is 99 this year, is he? He had his 100th birthday. And we would have liked to have him here today, but I believe he didn't know back from Florida. But Ron worked for him, was hired by, but WMT did something before the high school broadcast, which maybe you don't know what they did with professional baseball. Go ahead, Ron.
All right, we're going to tell you about the first broadcast of a Cedar Rapids professional baseball team game. Now the Colonels, then I don't know what would say what the name of the team was. It was 1935, and you know, Wally.
Probably Raiders.
Okay, the Raiders.
Probably was right.
I think it was.
All right, Bunnies Raiders.
Well, Bunnies and then the Raiders.
Okay. Anyway, 1935, and Mr. Corton then was the commercial manager of the radio station, and he decided that he would like to do some baseball, and so he asked the baseball team if he could do this. They said fine, he could, and he would start broadcasting at the beginning of this 1935 season. A few days later, the baseball team called and said, we're sorry, we can't allow you to do it because the Cedar Rapids Gazette has protested. They feel that their readership would be down on the baseball accounts that they do, and they don't want you to do the game, and they say that if you do the game, not right, you're not going to cover our team's games. And so he said fine, but it made him a little angry. And so he went out to Hill Park, I think, is that right? Baseball guys, Hill Park, where it was in 1935. And he looked around and he looked for some place where they might do the game outside the stadium. And so he saw this particular house, and he went and he knocked on the door and he talked to the man, and he talked the man into allowing him, his broadcast people, to do the game from the rooftop of their house outside the stadium. Paid him a little money. So they built a platform on the top of the house and began to do the season. And according to Mr. Corden, they couldn't tell the balls and the strikes very well. And they didn't have the lineups very well either because the ball club wasn't cooperating with them. But they fumbled along and did this for about 3 weeks. And then the ball club called and said, well, the Gazette has agreed that you're doing the games and it's not harming them that much, and you can come on in the stadium and do the games now. And so then they were allowed in. There's one story about during that time, the man that was doing the games was a man by the name of Bill Brown. And Bill related this story to me one time when I had him on the air. He said, we went out to do the game one Sunday afternoon at the man's house, but he had forgotten there was a game that day and the house was all locked up. So we had to cut the screen door and break in to do the broadcast. So that's how it was in 1935.
Bob Brooks was going to come today, and if you don't remember this, in about 1948, Bob came to Cedar Rapids. He lived here, grew up here, but he came to KCRG as his first job, and that was still radio then, and he did the high school games. I played in his first games that he broadcast, but Bob couldn't be here today. He had another appointment. So, but Ron, that is a story of when the Colonels or the old Raiders or the Bunny Rabbits or whatever we were then. Then one of them, and the house is still there on E Avenue, and they looked over the street and over the fence in right field so they could do it. A couple other things with the radio. WMT had an announcer that did sports. His name was Bert Puckett. And he left Cedar Rapids, went to Chicago in the 40s, late 40s, or middle 40s, and became a famous sportscaster, Bert Wilson. And if you go back to the Cubs, like Harry Carey, Bert Wilson would be one of the first, I believe, Cub announcers. Ron, you know more about history of announcing, but is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. Mr. Corden said that Bert Puckett, as his name was then, was doing the Cedar Rapids professional baseball games here, and a station from Indianapolis, which had a higher classification team, a AAA team, I think it was, called, and they said, we've heard you have a good announcer by the name of Bucket out there. Would you mind if we interviewed him? And Mr. Corden said, well, no, his name is Puckett, not Bucket, and you may interview him. And the man said, if we like him, though, we're going to have to change his name. And they did, and he changed it to Bert Wilson.
And if we could have had Mr. Corden here, another story told us, while you were there last summer at the Colonel office, was he tried to hire a man that became very famous. And who was he, Ron? And he couldn't afford it. He was in Des Moines.
Ronald Reagan?
Ronald Reagan. WMT tried to hire him to come here as a sportscaster, and he was a little too expensive. Let's just go to old Bud here. Bud Curran, probably the man that's most famous for moving dirt around in this city. Bud started his career when he was probably 10 years old at Old Hill Park, and that's where we've been talking about the Raiders or the Bunnies or that. And Bud, take it away.
Old Hill Park, was just north of Roosevelt School. And we moved up in B Avenue in 1925. And from that day on, that was my home. In fact, you look at the way things are on today, and the way we did at the old ballpark, Old Hill Park, just think, left field was 322 feet, center field was 247, a pop fly would be a home run, and right field was 303 down the right field line. And we did everything by hand over there. But there was 60 lights, and they were all, the lights were all open. It started to rain, and we had to do something to shut the power off. If not, we wouldn't have no lights. And the umpire didn't like that, but we didn't care. And they're talking about baseballs today. We get by with 6 baseballs a game. Rather even take a file, like a file, get scuffed up, take a file with fingernail, file it. Save on baseballs. Today it's a little different. But one thing I would started over there when I was about, must have been 10, 11 years old, picking up paper for 10 cents. Old Tom Collins was the groundkeeper then. And later on, Manus Kine was the head groundskeeper, and I started helping him doing the clubhouse work and working on the field and sweeping the grandstand. And it just got in my blood. And in 1940, I got a job in Madison, Wisconsin, and Thurman Harris at my place. Somebody couldn't be here today because he's got diabetes. That's what his trouble is. Anyhow, it's the experience I had at that ballpark. We got our ballpark that we had here before it tore down. I started there in 49, and I worked there through 01. Would be about 52 years. But I can say that I enjoyed every bit of it. Different players that you meet over the years, it's, you forget some. There's so many of them. But that's about the thing that was all I can say about Hill Park.
Okay, now, Bud is still active with the Colonels. He's a consultant. He doesn't go out and rake that diamond anymore, but he tells them how to do it. But he's the only man, probably in Cedar Rapids history, that's worked on the 3 diamonds, Hill Park, the old veterans, and the new veterans stadium. And I really think, Bud, everybody appreciates the good work that you've done. Bud's about 83 now. He's doing well. Had a little ill health about a year ago. But where's the limer you used to do? Here, let me pick it up here. Where is it? Oh, here it is. Bud brought this. Now, it doesn't have any lime in it. This is from 1934, so. What year was it, Bud?
34, I used that, the old Hill Park and also at Penn Stadium also. About, I'll say 10 years ago.
Okay.
But that's something I'd taken a bucket of lime and do the whole thing with that thing.
Yeah, you put it in there, but you go out there now and they have a board that's about 6 feet. It takes 2 people to put it down. Yeah, that's the modern way. Bud knew how to do it.
I had to have a wire brush. In case you got muddy, you got mud on there. Had to take the wire brush and brush it off.
And then once in a while, Bud had 2 beers before the game and the line got like this. Let's go. I've got a couple. We're going to try to get out of here in about 20 minutes. I know. Eddie Benedict. Eddie's about 88 years old, one of the old ball players, semi-pro, Daniels Park, M&J. Eddie, go ahead. Where were you back into the 30s?
Okay, and thanks for having me explain the M&J. The M&J was named Manufactured and Jobbers, and it originated, I would say, in 1928. And whenever the team was in the M&J, you had to have 4 people hired in your plant. And then the diamond has changed. I guess I think Tommy explained that the diamonds changed and on account of the sun, and that was really beneficial for the players. And from the M&J, we had several people go up to the big leagues, and Hal Trotsky, Bill Zuber, Red Van Fleet was in the league, but he didn't start here, and Roshak, Lefty Roshak, some of these people went from the M&J up to the big leagues. Once in a while I stutter a little bit. I had a mini stroke in February, so once in a while I reach for words. But anyway, I'll tell you one thing that happened one time. We were having a game right before the Raiders game, and we chose sides. Kenny Blackman took one side, and I took the other one. But anyway, we had this Lefty Roshak was one who went to big league. Anyway, Lefty. Anyway, Lefty was pretty darn wild. He was a good left-hand pitcher. Anyway, he threw out 6 balls, and he didn't get any of them strikes. So he finally went up to the plate umpire, and he said, "Hey, you're going to have to start calling these. That's about as close as I can come." Anyway, I'll just mention a few of the teams were in there. I can't mention all of them, and I couldn't because I can't remember. But anyway, Killian's had a team in there, Iowa Steel, Iowa Man, a Link Bell Speeder, and Collins. And also even had a team in there one time. I don't know if it was 1 or 2 years. And it was always a 8-team league. There might have been a time or two that had 6. Anyway, I don't want to forget the light company. That's who I played for. I played in 3 different teams, Iowa Man and Wilson's when I went to the university, and the Iowa Electric. And the Iowa Electric won that 9 out of 10 times. So we were a pretty good team. But anyway, there used to be a city league, and they played their games over by Lake Bell Speeder. And I can't tell you if any of the other teams went to the M&J, but I do know the light company did. And in fact, we used to practice over there at Lake Bell Speeder. And I think maybe I covered all the bases.
Well,
Oh, wait a minute. I got one base to cover. Will you let me do it?
you can go to, but I'm not going to give you any wine today, Eddie. You get
Okay.
a little wine in here over my house. We go all
One base
day.
covered. When the first team I played on with the light company, we had the best bat boy in the league. And I saw this skinny kid, wandering around Daniels Park. So he must have lived pretty close to the Daniels Park. His name was Bill Quimby.
During the World War II, the professional team disbanded, I believe 1941, and didn't re-enter professional baseball until 1949. The M&J League drew crowds at Daniels Park. Now think of it, Oakland Avenue. It was a two-way street then. H Avenue, there wasn't a fence around there. If you hit the ball into the street on the fly, it was a home run. If it rolled in, it was a two-big. They used to get crowds on Sunday, 4th of July, Labor Day, 1,500, 2,000 people. Free. And pass the little cigar box, you remember, or the hat, a dime, 15 cents, a doubleheader, maybe 2 bits. That was baseball. And like Eddie said, they had numerous people go into the professional leagues, and then some professionals came back to Cedar Rapids to play after their careers. Okay, let's go on. Grant High School, John Havlicek. Some of you don't realize we had 2 public schools besides the Catholic. We'll get to St. Pat's and that, but John Walchek went to the old Grant, which is the Board of Education.
Right, I graduated in 1935, but it was the Depression years, and we were all poor kids, and the Grant High School is where the Board of Education is now, and as you see it, in Washington on the east side, it was on the south side of Green Square, and they didn't have any playground or any place to practice, and same as we did. But we would, we had Coach Fred Winters and Norm Blakely, and Grant was actually a vocational school until about 1924, 25, and then it became a regular school, but they stretched foundry, machine shop, and the idea was that you would go to school there and then hire out to Iowa Steel, Iowa Man, or somewhere else. And the girls, they had sewing and so forth, and typing. But anyway, to practice, there was no practice field for either Grant or Washington, and we would have to run up to Roosevelt School, which was a mile, and we'd have to run back. The coach told us that. And we had that same field that O.C. mentioned for practice, and that was about a block or so long. And I think the Linn County Public Health is there. But we played in the Mississippi Valley, which was Washington, Davenport, Clinton, Dubuque, West and East Waterloo, and Iowa City. And our games were always played at Co. And once in a while, in our track, we would have the track meet at Co. or Cornell. And then we were all poor kids, and we would borrow or buy the football shoes from the previous years, and for track, we also had to run way over to Roosevelt, and then we ran around there. And our basketball, we had a gym that was hardly, well, I would say about this size, and there was a running track around the top. Of course, you couldn't shoot much because of the track. But the squads were small, and there were about 15 out for basketball, and the sophomores about 8. And in football, we had about 25, and 20 the varsity, and 20 in the sophomore. And you played both ways, offense and defense, and you did substitute. You couldn't, when you were substituting, you couldn't call a play until 2 plays later. And in basketball, like I mentioned before, it was always the tip at the center after scoring, and the scores were low. And they stretched defense more so than offense. Bill, anything else?
Well, the only thing, John, is, what was your nickname? What was the Grant High School?
Oh, yeah, they were called the Panthers.
Panthers.
And Washington was Tigers. We were
Tigers and Panthers got together. Who won?
Yeah, it was a 76, 6-0 Washington.
Oh, yeah.
They were very, first we were all small.
You were a little smaller.
Yeah.
Well, I heard this. Now, Russ Knapp was going to be here today, but became not feeling so well this morning, didn't make it. He was going to talk on Washington when he was there in the 20s. And Russ told me one day that we used to go over and recruit those West Siders. We got some of the Grant boys to come our way. And that's why we usually beat them now. Is that true, John?
That's true, yeah. Once in a while, someone from over there would come to take a pattern machine shop or one of these. But them two, Dick Zwatchek and the Messengers on the west side went to the east side where they had a good team.
Okay. Well, just so you know that we had these 2 high schools and the 4 middle schools, Roosevelt, McKinley, Franklin, and Wilson, and then they went in 1935, went into high school. So Grant was closed, and then Washington was closed. Green Square. Bob Casmore, real quick like St. Wentz. The St. Wentz Red Hawks.
St. Wentz Red Hawks. I saw Bob Drosall out here, so I have to be careful, because I have to be truthful. It's kind of interesting. Barron said, he was a national wrestling champion or something, and Bob just told me that in the paper this morning there was something where we were state champions. It's funny how 50 years changes things. We were Catholic champions in 52 and 53, but St. Wentz started as an actual high school. It was built back in 1926, and at that time they did have football and started basketball. They had a fellow named Sonka, who was the ex-captain of the University of Nebraska football team. And oddly enough, in 1928, Father Albert Zacher and his group scrimmaged the old Washington High School Tigers. And at the end of the third quarter, Linn Novak, who was a former St. Wentz guy, who was their coach, said, I think the scrimmage is over. And the story that I always heard about it was that St. Wentz was actually ahead. And the kids were so much bigger down at St. Wentz, and they were all packing house type kids, and they were pretty rough bunch down there. We used to practice basketball, Bob and I did, back in the very early 50s. We had very small classes. Our total high school, four grades, was well under 100 kids. And we were fortunate enough in those years to have some pretty good athletes, but we used to scrimmage occasionally against the Wilson High School, or Wilson packing plant teams and Iowa Steel teams, who were alumni generally of St. Wentz. And when you scrimmaged against guys that were mature and throwing meat and carcasses all days, we learned to play a pretty tough game, and a lot of the schools would say, boy, we sure hate to play against the St. Wentz kids, they're so rough. And we didn't know any better, because that's the way we learned to play. In those days, Tommy Thompson was saying about IC, they were good. And our claim to fame was in 1 year in there we beat IC. And unfortunately, the games, it used to be very important to the areas down there. The basketball was a big thing. There wasn't a lot going on. We didn't have television. We didn't have a lot of those things. And a lot of our games would end up in altercations. And in fact, the game that we beat IC, and Bob Jennings, bless his heart, is one of my very good friends. He was very upset with us, and the police, I think, stopped the game, didn't they, Bob, with about 8 seconds left or something?
I don't recall that.
And we would have seen well, it was a total misunderstanding. It was very important to all of the kids and the families, and we played IC, we played St. Pat's in Cedar Rapids. In those days, the publics and the privates didn't really play each other in the state tournaments, which we did there, and we played all of the larger teams all year. So by the time we got into the state tournament, it was a lot better for us. But we practiced there, and it was a very important part of our life down there. They had football for a while, but the classes were so small, and the facilities. I look at that old gym now, which is still there, and later on, when I went to college and we played in college, I think the floors were probably about half the size of the university gymnasiums. But those were very good days, very important days, and I think a lot of fond memories, and it was a very important part of our culture and our social lives. Just one quick thing, Bob Brooks used to broadcast our games, and Brooksy used to come down there and he'd be up in St. Wentz and he'd be up in the balcony, and Bob was pretty young then. This was in the 1949, 1950, 51 era, and Bob would come down after the games and he'd interview us, and he was always having to put his hand over the microphone because people would be saying good and bad things behind it, and there wasn't a delay at that time. And Bob, a couple times, he'd come back and say,
every time I come down here, I go back to the KCRG studio, I get in trouble because they keep saying, this stuff comes out over the air, we can't do that. So those are fun days.
We have about 3 more people, and we'll save Ray. I think Ray's story, Ray Peters Pretzel is one of the best as far as high school, but, excuse me, Wally Krause, the president, Colonel, and Chuck Fulton, on the board of directors there, grew up in the Wilson, Riverside area, Wilson High School, Southwest, and a lot of people don't know what diamonds were there. Wally, you take over, give it to Chuck, and you have a few moments.
Yeah, I'll let Charlie handle most of it, really, but we'll get into Riverside and Hayes Park, where we grew up and had our baseball and spent a lot of time there and so on. The one thing I did want to kind of diverse to a little bit here is that, talking about John Beck sign at Daniels Park, I think I heard that it cost $25 for that sign. It was the first sign that was ever sold for paying a company or a sporting event and that type of thing. The one at the Colonel's cost $650,000, just to give you a little history on how things do change and things go on. Things I remember: Henry Hunter, Shrimp Motter, Skin Frank Tverdik. Those are names that, and Dick Rozek playing in Riverside. And I remember the other thing about Riverside, you talk about the conditions that we heard down around the back house. I remember that the cedar would always flood, and Riverside Park would always be the biggest mud clots that you ever saw in your life. And now we talk about the infield at the Colonel's, and the beauty of that, and what we played on was unbelievably bad. But we all lived through it, had a great time, and it was a lot of fun. Charlie, help me out a little bit, please.
Wally was talking about the flooding at Riverside Park, and when the water went down, there would be these ponds or pools left, and we could get some big carp and catfish out there and take home. When I first started playing down, and Marty was talking about the Kid League and with Wally, the baseball diamond was in the southwest corner of the park, and it was 90-foot bases, and that was in the baseball area. And then later on, it got moved to the northeast side of the park. And Riverside Park was probably twice as big as it is now. Pennington Ford came in there, I think in the 80s, and took about half the park. And down the south side was an open storm sewer ditch that ran from there all the way to the river. And a lot of the balls we had fish out of there. But Roosevelt Hotel, like was mentioned, was big-time baseball, junior legion baseball. And then we moved up to out of the Kid League, American Legion, then to high school baseball. And high school baseball was at Riverside Park in 1946, and then moved up to Hayes Field after that. And because of the park flooding with high school baseball, they had to have a place to play. And I think the thing that I appreciated and remember most about Hayes Field and Riverside Park, it was a place that we learned baseball. We were taught baseball. And that was the greatest thing for the West Side kids. And from that, Wilson High School in 1947 and 1948 were the Iowa State high school baseball champions. And for those 2 years, we had a combined record of 66-3. Kids on the team was like Fulton and Oliver and Reed and Sharper and yes, and we did have some Bohemian kids on that team. Verbacek, Pavlicek, Simonoski. We had a crazy kid that played shortstop for us by the name of Charlie Peatfish, and I don't know how we put him on the team. You know, that's kind of Riverside Park and Hayes Field and Wilson High School. Well, another thing about Wilson High School, too, we were called the Ramblers. School colors were blue and gold. Our football uniforms were green and silver. our basketball uniforms were green and white, and our baseball uniforms were white and gray trimmed in red. So I have no idea where all that stuff came from.
These people were very good baseball players. And from 1946 to 50, Cedar Rapids, that's when the Iowa High School started spring or summer program. Wilson won it 2 years in a row. Franklin, we won it 1 year, and then Wilson came back and won the state championship. In 4 years, Cedar Rapids won the state high school baseball championship consecutively. We'll go on there and then we'll finish up with Ray. Bill Broussard, who grew up around Ellis Park. And Ellis Park has a history of many recreational sports things. And Billy, take it over, and we'll go to Ray next, and we'll be finished up.
Okay, a little history of Ellis Park and the time check area. Ellis Park was purchased in various stages from 1905 through 55. The original land was owned by the Robert Ellison and the realty company that he had. It now consists of 395 plus acres. Ellis is the largest park in Cedar Rapids. It currently consists of 18-hole golf course, a swimming pool, a wading pool, 3 lighted softball fields. Once upon a time there were 6 diamonds there. They have been reduced and made a little better in terms of safety and size and things. So that there are now 3 lighted fields. Horseshoe courts, there are 18 of them, all lighted now. There are 5 playgrounds with play apparatus, Manhattan Lake, Robbins Lake. The Shakespeare Gardens are known because of the beauty and the architecture there. There's a formal flower garden. There now consists of 2 tennis courts. Originally, Ellis Park, once upon a time, had 1 clay court. There's a band concert area, basketball courts. There are now 7 basketball courts at Ellis Park that have recently been installed. The Cedar Rapids Water Ski Club practices and has shows in the Cedar River. It's the home of the Cedar Rapids Softball Hall of Fame. The former tennis court there now is a sand volleyball court. There are rental gardens you can install and grow your garden, whatever you want to do in Ellis Park now. Early on in the history of Cedar Rapids, there was a bathing beach on the river. It was used there, and as the popularity of it expanded, a temporary bathhouse, a tin bathhouse was built, and the floor in there was just the dirt. And then in 1914, a permanent bathhouse was, the temporary one was in 1914. The permanent bathhouse was built in 1924. It still exists there and is the home of the Riverfront Improvement Commission. Ellis Park was then the first park in Cedar Rapids to have a municipal swimming pool, and it was remodeled, I believe, in around 1987, and is currently going through renovation right now. In 1914, bids were taken for swimming suits to be rented to people that used the area, and an order was placed with Killian's. 5 dozen misses, those were the kids' suits, $15 for 5 dozen. 5 dozen ladies at $15, 9 dozen men's, $8.50, 12 dozen boys, it cost $1.25, and 300 towels for 10 cents. So, what a bargain we had there. The park also featured the first municipal golf course, opened in 1923 as a 9-hole course and expanded to 18 holes in 1948. The Manhattan Pavilion, used as a warming house for our outdoor skating and a picnic pavilion, was constructed in 1955. The boat harbor that currently exists there now was established around 1950. The first tennis programs in Cedar Rapids were held on clay courts at Ellis and Beaver Park in the 1930s. Popular activities that existed near Ellis Park included renting boats, canoes, and so forth from Sheftick's Boathouse. It's now the home of a spa and beauty shop. If you wouldn't recognize what it is now compared to what it was. Then that area was used for several restaurants. Ellis Park was the home of a popular duck pond. Now they seem to just reside wherever they want to. The Capahan was a large boat that cruised the river. You danced or enjoyed the refreshments of your choice, or just enjoyed the view as the boat cruised up and down the river. The Cedar View Country Club, located on 11th Street Northwest, was a popular stopping off place after a round of golf in the early history of the golf course in Cedar Rapids. This site provided an outstanding view of the city. This was also the original starting place for hole number 1 of the Cedar Rapids Golf Course at the top of 11th Street Northwest. Some of that land used for the present course was purchased from Cedar View. It's now the home to the Eagles Club. Ellis Park was also the site of many Kid League summer baseball games, a summer location for playgrounds. In those days, early on in the history of the park, playgrounds had competition for kids, knock hockey, tetherballs, things like that, and then there would be West Side competition for a city champion for the West Side. The East Side would have their own, and then they would either meet at Ellis Park or on the East Side Park and determine the city champion. Archery lessons were formerly held, the location where the band concerts now are held. Teams to remember in terms of softball would be Teleconnect, Weldy Way, and way back in the 20s and 30s, there was an outstanding team called Armstrongs. Mr. Armstrong, being the devoted religious person he was, wouldn't let the team play on Sunday, and they just renamed their team for Sunday games the Harrison All-Stars. Cedar River was also used as a source for ice. Hubbard Ice used to saw ice and then sell that around town. My dad used to cut some of that ice. It also, sand was dredged from the Cedar River and sold at King's. City prisoners worked in the city banks near Ellis Park for $3 a day, cleaning the riverbank in 1914. Then after the World War II, the government placed mobile homes, what were the original mobile homes, or the very small mobile homes, in an area behind what now where Pearson's Flower Shop now is, just west of 8th Street, as affordable homes for the veterans returning. And then also during World War II, the city made available land for what were called Victory Gardens between somewhere just south of O Avenue between 8th and 9th Streets. And people were encouraged to raise garden vegetables and things like that that they could donate to various people and help with the food situation.
So Ellis Park had a great deal of history about our recreation. To finish up the story of Roosevelt High School, where we remember I said we didn't start high school baseball in Cedar Rapids until 1947. And in 1945, Ray Pretzelka, his professional name, Ray Peters. Ray played, got a chance to play in the big leagues, played for the Cleveland Indians farm system many years, outstanding baseball player, played at Roosevelt, Notre Dame. You were captain of Notre Dame, weren't you, Ray? Of the baseball team. Tell them what you did in 1945 and how it all ended up, and I'll close the meeting.
Well, we're going back to the early 40s again, Bill, because there's a group of us boys at Roosevelt, and we played for Butternut Bakers in the American Legion. Back in those days, the American Legion, they provided a place to play and different teams to play, schedules, but Butternut themselves provided us uniforms. We played 6-7 years together. We had a good ball club. We won the American Legion City Championship in 43 and 44. We always thought that we would go and win the state championship. Unfortunately, we lost out in the district championship in 1944. One of our pitchers, well, there are only 3 pitchers actually. There's Manny Wise, myself, and Al Schamberger. And Al Schamberger's father, Russ Schamberger, was our coach manager. You call it a coach back in that era. It's a manager now in this era. But we played Burlington, and Al was pitching the ball game, and he got on the rubber and went to throw a pitch, and the umpire called time. He said, "That's a balk." Nobody was on base, but he still called it a balk. But I don't know where anybody was going. But so then they finally got a man on base, and Al went to pitch again. He had his regular motion, his regular follow through, and everything. And the umpire called a balk again. And we tried to find out what we were doing wrong, what he was doing wrong, I should say. Well, Al, on baseball, you put 1 foot on the rubber and then you follow through. This umpire says both feet have to be on the rubber. That's softball. And he said, no, that's baseball. Well, Al could not pitch successfully then. Unfortunately, we lost out to Burlington at that time. Okay, 1945, that was our senior year, and about 4 or 5 of us were 17 years old. In Legion baseball, you could only play when you were 16. So what were we going to do? We knew we could win. A lot of other people in Cedar Rapids said we could win. And we had a very good baseball player. We had a lot of fellows, Joe Bailey, who had helped our team out, Chine Stola, an elderly fellow who used to pitch a lot of baseball. He could wind up and throw right hand, and a couple of innings he'd throw left-handed. Our practice area, OC, we were talking about the old Roosevelt skating rink. That's where we practiced. There was no mound. We didn't have a pitching mound. We didn't have any backstop. We didn't have any batting cage. We were lucky to get bases on that field. But what were we going to do? We couldn't play American Legion with some of us fellows too old. So we decided we'd like to install baseball in our high school. So we went to our principal, Fred Kluss, and we said to Fred, Mr. Kluss, Mr. Kluss, we would like to play high school baseball. He said, you can't do that. Why can't you do that? Well, there's so many things that you don't have. For an example, they said, well, you don't have any uniforms. We said, we'll get them. Where are you going to play? We'll play someplace. Maybe Riverside, maybe Daniels Park. Well, you don't have a schedule. We'll make up a schedule. You don't have any bats and balls. We'll get them. And so you don't have a coach. That was the big deterrent right there, the coach. We had Russ Schamberger, who I mentioned, old Schamberger's Bakery. Remember Schamberger's Bakery on 3rd Avenue? That was our manager coach. And he said, I'd be glad to do it, but you can't do it because you have to have a teacher who's in the school system to coach the team in high school. So we said, well, we'll find one. Fortunately, Clem Carney was willing to assist us. Clem, unfortunately, didn't know too much about baseball. Pretty good basketball coach, but not too good at baseball. But anyway, Russ Schamberger says, I'll help out if I can. He'll come to the practices. So we went to the Board of Education, told them our story, and they said, well, if you could do all that stuff, if you boys want to win so bad, go ahead. We went and got the uniforms from the Cedar Rapids Raiders, but as you know about that, that was back in '45. We bought our own bats and balls. We bought actually our own spikes. Practice, again, was over at Roosevelt. We went out and played such teams as Norway, Watkins, Belle Plaine. I can't remember else, but we did schedule a game with Davenport. And Davenport, we went to Davenport and we lost that ball game 12-4. So we thought, hey, we're out of the class here. But anyway, after that, that was our practice games, and then they assigned us to go ahead and play. We went through the sectional, district, sub-state, and then we went to Manson, Iowa, to play the state championship. We went through the state championship. Fortunately, I won one, Manny White won one, and Al Shamber pitched our last ball game. It was a no-hit, 1-0 ball game. We beat East Waterloo. Dick Orth was the pitcher at that time. Incidentally, we didn't have any facilities for a school bus, although it was volunteer work. One man who hasn't been mentioned, I don't think here today, was one of the broadcasters and sports writers, Tate Cummins.
Yes.
Tate Cummins joined us there. He drove. Another young gal was there, Dottie Ireland. Who was Dottie Ireland? But later on it was Dottie Cummins. Another fellow there, great photographer, Del Blumenschein. All of these people drove us there. They were so happy to see us win, and so we were so happy. Volunteer, like I said, I'm trying to remember if there's anything else that we didn't do. Incidentally, I'd like to tell Bud, I had a chance to play with Cedar Rapids Ball Club Indians back in 1950. In addition to other activities on the field, he used to be able to, he used to take some dirt and mix it up with a little water, and he said, if you have it so wrong, he says, I'll put this on your Ray, that's good enough. But we didn't have any, back in that era, we had no trainer, and in professional baseball, we didn't have a short reliever, a middle reliever, and a late reliever. We played, we pitched every fourth day, and relieved in between. The reason, how do I got my name? Peters. After graduating from Notre Dame, I had an opportunity to play with different, I should say, sign with different ball clubs. But Cy Slatnik, here from Cedar Rapids, provided me with a 4-year scholarship at Notre Dame. For 4 years, all it cost me was $100 for 4 years. After graduation, I had an opportunity to try out with the Yankees, the Tigers, Red Sox, but I quote something to Slatnik. We went into Cleveland, and there was Bill Veeck, Hank Greenberg, and of course the big four in the pitching staff was Bob Lemon, Mike Garcia, Early Wynn, and was that 3? Allie Reynolds. Well, anyway, there's 4 of them. And Jim Egan was a catcher. Well, they told me, they said, well, you played 4 years at Notre Dame as an outfielder and first baseman, but you'll never make it. And I said, well, I'll show you again. Well, they said, you might make it as a pitcher. We want to sign you. So I went to the lowest classification, in which the manager there at Green Bay, Wisconsin, was Phil Seggy. And Phil Seggy said, Peters, where in the world are you from? Chicago? I said, no, Cedar Rapids. He says, I've never seen a good baseball player from Cedar Rapids. But anyway, playing Class D baseball, I hit .236. So next year I was a pitcher. So I did have an opportunity to have a cup of coffee with the Indians. Enjoyed it very much. I enjoyed being here today, and I'd like to see all the fellows going out to see the Cedar Rapids Colonels.
Very polite audience, but we missed a lot of history. I mean, if we could, if Russ Knapp could have been here, we could have gotten a little more into the Tigers when they played the Panthers. And we didn't get the St. Pat's much, but that was a strong Catholic school on the west side, and for where the church is now, and the school's in the back. But all these people here actually were there and participated on the diamonds, the river. George, we're glad you didn't drown because you've done so much.
Hey, me too.
So thank you for coming. Barb, thank you for letting us come, and we hope